So Julian finally had everything catch up to him. He basically had a mini breakdown when he woke up alone as Damon went to nakedly, basically, commune with the earth, and he was left there, and it was like this blood all over his mouth. And the memory of what happened the night before, which had been so wondrous and exotic and, sensual, suddenly crashed on home to him. So the adrenaline's worn off. The truth of his predicament has come home to him. And really, because remember, he went from hating vampires to suddenly being one, and not just a normal one, but the vampire prince. As Damon will make clear to him, his role, even though he sees himself as like sort of an everyman, as one of the proletariat, he is not. He's royalty in the vampire world, and he's got to start accepting that. And Julian is not comfortable with that at all. So, but I would imagine becoming a vampire, even if one wanted it, let's just not even take the trauma that Julian and Christian went through, that it would be a shock. Even after you wanted it and you planned for it and you knew how it was going to go, I think it would, for me anyway, still be like, this has really happened. This is really happening. I'm really this type of being that needs the blood of humans to survive. So how do you think your first night as a vampire would be? Jay, you're playing Arceus in this scene, who actually really helps Julian calm down. So how did you come to think of this scene? Did you think this was more realistic, or should Julian have been far more upset than he was? Or should he just have gone on with it? And how do you think you would have behaved yourself?
I think Arceus definitely sees a lot of this or remembers a lot of this. That's why he's such a calming presence. But I think the way Julian reacted is pretty accurate. That kind of post-pleasure guilt compounded with the fact that he's actually got blood all over him. I'd probably react much in the same way. Mine would probably be night of, though. You know that thing where you're like, oh, I really feel like pizza or burgers or something like that, and it feels so
or
good.
Me with a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So good.
And the second you're done, and you're there and your hands are all messy and sticky and it's dripping from your face and you're just like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I think that would hit me way early. I don't think I'd go to bed feeling good. I'd be like, ah.
I mean, is there a non-shocking way to introduce someone to feeding on other human beings? I think the way they handled it is probably best. Just rip the Band-Aid off, experience as much as you can, dive in the deep end, and then deal with the consequences and anticipate it getting easier with time.
Damon doesn't deal with any of the consequences.
No, he doesn't.
Oh no, I'm a god.
But he will. He has the long-term consequences of Christian being annoyed by him in this instance, I think. Because the fact is Christian's going to have to deal with this forever. So, there's no wading into these waters, I don't think. I think throwing in the deep end may have been insensitive, but I think in the long run it was the right choice. But I would have reacted the exact same way. I agree with Jay.
I think that, Damon actually leaving shows some of his limitations, Edward, doesn't it? He doesn't even consider what it would be like for Julian to wake up after their wonderful evening together and be like, holy shit, what did I just do?
Well, I don't think Damon's known anything different. No. Why would you assume that there's any problem here? That's right. Wondering why your date is crying over their delightful chicken meal. Right. It's like, why?
Has that ever happened to you?
What? Maybe.
Did you have dinner? Did you have dinner with a vegetarian and give them chicken?
I may have.
Chicken's not meat.
Yes, well, the less said of this, the
Not
better.
to defend Damon in this instance, but didn't he also think that Julian was going to sleep a lot longer than he did?
He did, but maybe he just, he took a risk, didn't he? To do what he needed to do.
And speaking in Damon's defense, I mean, being a god, you assume that what you believe is true and that that's how it's going to be. The thing I really enjoyed about this sequence was Damon has never, ever had a fledgling. Yeah. And his arrogance about this is just how things are. This is actually one area that he knows nothing about. He's a first-time parent. But rather than being totally freaked out by Christian and standing over him and watching him and never leaving his side, he's like, it'll be fine. The child will probably survive. Right. It's fine.
It'll be fine.
It'll be
Julian
fine.
is going to be perfectly fine. It's totally fine. But he gets very jealous when Arceus is the one to actually comfort Julian in this scene. He does not like that.
Well, I mean,
but at the
Arceus
same time,
touched him without permission. How dare he?
Yes, he did.
Damon has never had to deal with anybody else's feelings or thoughts or ideas. So this is all new to him.
And jealousy is new to him too, which I think is really interesting because he's never had someone so close, so intimate, that these other people that he chose to try to make into his fledglings died. So there's a tremendous amount of guilt there. When he's even trying to accept Julian, that he might survive. The thought of what comes next, in many ways, Damon is almost a virgin when it comes to having an intimate relationship. He's never had one like this before with an equal. And so for me, the withdrawing behaviors are actually because he's terrified. He doesn't know how this is going to go. So by just moving back into the shadows, back into the night and watching for a time. After all, if you have immortality, what does an hour, a week, a year mean? It's nothing.
Exactly. Why would this be a problem? And I think for Damon especially, he is still holding Julian a little bit at arm's length, probably because of the fact that all of others have died and that he doesn't have the experience and that it's sort of like an intimacy that is new to him that may be a little overwhelming, which he's intimated that it may not be altogether what he expected because things are moving quickly. And that's for him, this is like way too quick. This is like, he needs to have some time.
And he's never had a relationship with anyone who's even close to being equal with him.
No.
And I think that is what I'm enjoying is the metaphor for this relationship is when a person chooses to actually try to have a relationship with an equal, with a peer. It's no longer a relationship of just exchanging bodily fluids, to use the vampire analogy. It's something deeper, something more. And I've really enjoyed that journey of watching how this apparently limitless creature is terrified of intimacy with some other thing and the pain. And that was why I enjoyed it as well. This idea of if you have had your heart broken, if you have had it ripped out of your chest and stomped on, there's real fear there of opening yourself up again to the possibility of something more.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. So that's where, sort of where he's at, which is interesting because he needed to have an arc, by the way. He couldn't just be this godlike being and not have an arc. He had to have vulnerabilities that had nothing to do with, his powers. And that couldn't just be because he hadn't drunk enough blood. I felt like he needed to really have some vulnerability here that, his powers just could not fix. And how he's with Julian is definitely part of that. I hoped you liked this behind the scenes discussion with the cast and crew of the Everdark podcast. If you want to join the conversation, come to YouTube and tell us what you think in the comments. And just so you know, I'm not the only one reading the comments. The entire cast is too, and they're very eager and excited to hear from you. If you are already listening on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when the next episode of Everdark comes out.